welcome back to Just Hear Me Out. Today, I wanted to do an episode on Mormons, MLMs, and something called HeartSell. So let me break this down. I've been watching a lot of true crime, and as we've established before, I grew up Mormon. So some of the more recent crime issues happening with some Mormon people in Utah has me really interested. And some people have talked to me about it in the sense of why are there so many Mormon criminals in Utah, or people going off the deep end,
Well, I think part of it probably is because it's such a big Mormon community, right? So I'm sure that's why it's coming from the Utah area, because that's where most of them reside, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
There was this, the big MLM, which is, by the way, multi-level marketing. So a big kind of pyramid scheme that happened for quite a while is LuLaRoe, the leggings thing that people were selling online. So there's been documentaries about that. That was a Mormon couple that owned that. Definitely a pyramid scheme where the top 1% make a lot of money and everyone else is losing money in order to buy inventory to sell, but then they end up just not being able to sell it, or only being successful if they get other people to sell underneath them. And they're making a commission off their...
I mean, that sounds like the old school, Mary Kay, Avon. All those people use that very similar, but it is considered like a Ponzi scheme or pyramid scheme, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So also the other two huge ones lately, I don't know if you've heard of these people. There's Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. I think the court hearings are going on around now, or last year and this year. So it's 2024 and 2025. Murdered their kids. Actually, I think they murdered his wife first, and then they got together. And the kids were Lori's kids, and she murdered, or probably he did, but she knew about it. And this weird shit about some Mormons going super extreme and believing in their kids being possessed by demons.
So not that there is a reason to kill your children or someone else to kill your children. Is that what they were saying their reasoning was, to kill the children? They felt that the children were possessed?
Yes.
Oh my God, this is
the
horrible.
only way to help their children would be to kill them. And by the way, this is not a Mormon thing. It's an extremist thing within Mormonism. And I've come to find out there's a book called Visions of Glory that is kind of on the fringes, and really extreme Mormons, specifically in Utah, who read this book tend to get really wonky and strange ideas about people being turned into zombies or possessed by demons or something. And it does kind of jive with some of the foundation teachings in Mormonism about what we existed before we were born on Earth and what happens after we die. Mm-hmm. So it does kind of correlate with that frame of reference. But
so do you feel when these people are reading the book that they are getting somewhat brainwashed, or it's...
Yes.
Okay.
But I think what I wanted to explain in this episode, and I also enjoy talking to you about it, Demetra, because it's all new to you.
Yeah, I have no idea. So this is so interesting to me. Fill me in, girlfriend.
Okay, and there's also a really big case going on. Ruby Franke.
Okay.
She was had a YouTube channel called 8 Passengers, and to me, 8 Passengers sounds like a cult, but it was actually a really popular YouTube channel for parenting and stuff.
Okay.
And the 8 Passengers had to do with, she and her husband had 6 kids, and they thought that they might be showing people how great Mormonism is also by being a happy big family in Utah and documenting.
That's a cute name, 8 Passengers, so 6 kids.
Yeah.
Mother, father. Okay, that's kind of a cute
Only it sort of came out in one of their videos that it sounds like she's pretty abusive to her kids. Her oldest son had said on a video, he clearly looked like he didn't want to be there because, when your kids are teenagers, duh, they don't want to be involved. And he said that he'd been sleeping on a beanbag chair in the basement for 7 months because his bedroom had been taken away as punishment.
For 7 months?
Yeah. So that's when it started blowing up, and she went totally off the rails. I mean, that's a whole other episode, to be honest. But she is in jail now, and she's definitely somebody who drank the Kool-Aid of this book called Visions of Glory. And she went on to severely abuse her two youngest kids. And it is like, I mean, I haven't like cried at a documentary in a while. I was like bawling. One of the kids escaped.
Was it, I'm sorry to interrupt, was it physical abuse or mental abuse or both?
Both. I believe she was in the mindset that she was trying to get the demon out of her kid. So her one son who has escaped and was like begging neighbors for food and water was skin and bones. He had been tied up multiple times. He had like sores all over his wrists and ankles. And in her diary, she had written that she doesn't feed demons. And she would make him stand out in the yard, like in the sun for hours and hours and hours.
Wait, and where was the father?
That's another thing. He's not in jail. I really wish he was. Apparently, she walked all over him and she told him that he needed to go better himself and that he couldn't talk to her or their kids and he had to move out. I think because he watched porn once or something.
Wow.
So
he didn't even know the abuse was going on, or he did, but then at that point he was kicked out. So
he probably did, but there's no proof of that. Because he, in this documentary, actually said he cared more about her than his kids. So because she said, don't talk to the kids, he didn't.
Shut up. Wait, I know. What's the name of this document? I'm writing this down. What's the name of it again?
It's called Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke. And her name is spelled Franke. It's a Hulu original.
Oh, it's a Hulu. Okay, I might have to borrow my sister's account. I don't have Hulu. That's probably why I haven't watched it yet, or I probably would have, you know? It sounds really sad, though. So, okay, so why is all this happening within the Mormon community? What do you think?
So I do think, okay, we've talked about this before. Let me just be flat out honest by saying I think the Mormon church is like a cult.
Yeah.
It's very high control. So if the word to the listeners here, if the cult thing is offensive to anyone, I'm okay calling it high control. It's also very patriarchal. So the men are above women all the time to the point where, you know, even when I was still participating, which would be like 10 years ago, in any sort of like documentation for a family, it would say head of household, and that's the man. And plenty of women I knew who were extremely educated and independent or what have you, or perhaps even the breadwinner of their family would say that to them was offensive. If there is a head of the household, it's both. Which, by the way, I want to reiterate, I consider myself feminist, but I want to point out, I think it should be equal. Like there's two heads of household because there's two adults. It's not that a woman should be in charge of the whole family either.
Right.
You know? Anyway,
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
digress.
agree.
So even women who have some authority in the Mormon church, for example, there's like a women's group. So the people in charge of that still have to answer to the men and can't do anything kind of on their own. So when you grow up thinking that's okay, and it's like supposed to be like your religion, right? Your beliefs and how God is and how life is. I think people are more accepting of coercion and control because it's familiar.
Yeah, it's what you know.
Yeah. Okay, so backtracking just a little bit here. Have you ever heard of Mark Vicente?
No.
Okay, he is so interesting. He's really well known these days because of the NXIVM cult. He was a whistleblower for it. That's the one where it was like a self-improvement group.
Okay.
And okay, well, anyway, NXIVM. So he's a filmmaker by trade.
Okay.
And he made the film What the Bleep Do We Know? It's a documentary.
Okay.
So he's really well known for that. And now, ever since NXIVM has been disbanded and the cult leader is in jail, actually, Mark Vicente has a podcast called WTF is on My Mind. And he's just like, he's my kind of person. He's like a super deep thinker, really interesting dude. He has an episode on his podcast that I've listened to like 3 times because it just like, whoa. It's called Weaponizing Filmmaking. So I'm going to put a link to this because
I was just going to say, we need to tag him and the link to that as well for listeners. Okay.
So because he's a documentary filmmaker, he studies this stuff, is what he does for a living. So in the description of this episode, Weaponizing Filmmaking, the power of music to play the human instrument. So it's about how like filmmakers can twist everything to make you feel however they want you. And it made me think about when we started doing this podcast, I wanted to have like intro music.
Yeah.
And I remember playing some, short clips of music that we could legally use and thinking like, oh, does this sound depressing? Is this happy? Is this, because we didn't want it to be too dark. But it was like hard to decide because it's like the feel of your show, right?
Yeah.
So he talks all about that, like major chords and flat chords and sharp chords and like what kind of emotion those elicit. And I wanted to point out my dogs, when there's something scary on TV, right before it happens, it usually goes da, da, da.
Yeah.
The dogs, their ears go up and one of them starts to shake. And I'm like, how do the dogs even know?
Well, my dog that had passed away, Vinny, and my current dog, Mia, every time I put on Law and Order, it's like, dun, 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 the beginning, the Law and Order thing. They both would run to the couch and get on a specific part of the couch and like fold their hands and they're like ready to watch. I'm going to record it one day so you can see and watch how she reacts when she hears the Law and Order sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
crazy.
Sometimes when I'm cooking, I'll play dance music. And one of my dogs is always just like, she's like jumping and dancing.
So cute.
I know, but it's like the vibe of the music works for them too. Also, an example that Mark Vicente said in this episode, and I totally recommend people listening to this whole episode that he has, Weaponizing Filmmaking. So he talks about a little test that Alfred Hitchcock did, or experiment, if you will. He had a frame of just his face and have him like, I think with a neutral look and then smiling. So when he put a first frame being a woman playing with a child, and then the next frame was him smiling. And anybody that would look at that would think like, oh, he's a sweet man. He's touched by how the mom is with her child. Then he had the same picture, but preceding it, a woman laying on the beach or something. So someone like being a little bit sexy, and then his face and him smiling. And the perception was he's a dirty old man and he's thinking nasty things, But it was the exact same footage.
Right. Even though it was just him smiling, it was whatever was put in front of him, people made judgment.
Yeah.
Basically.
And then if you can imagine, you add music to something like that, it is very powerful. What kind of message you're putting out and driving people to, this would be coercion, right?
Yeah.
Eliciting an emotion very deliberately, and it works every time. Okay. So back to the Mormon thing, break down really quick the structure of how it works when you grow up Mormon. It depends where you live, which congregation you go to. So even within the same town, the powers that be that are above you create the ward boundaries. And then that ward is your group of people that you see every Sunday. And they'll have like a chapel. And sometimes there's like 3 wards that go to it. And they stagger the timing of them. And it's considered, not right or disobedient to go to a different ward than what you're assigned to. This is kind of different than like I have clients who are Jewish and how they explain to me how you decide which synagogue you go to. And some are more devout. Some are more laid back. Some have female rabbis. Some will never have a female rabbi. And the people that are really like that go there. So it's like you can be a little bit more flexible and have your crew of people that are like-minded. And it seems a little more comfortable. Anyway, there's this thing called General Conference with Mormons. And it's every April and every October. And you don't meet on Sunday with your ward. It's kind of like a whole weekend thing. It's 10 hours of lectures from the head of the church in Utah, in Salt Lake. So if you live in Japan, you're still watching this footage. Everybody who's Mormon has to watch this. The Mormon church owns several corporations. Mormon church could be considered a corporation itself. There's this section called Bonneville Communications, and it's advertising and marketing. Bonneville Communications has trademarked this thing. They call it HeartSell. There's this description of it, but exactly what it is proprietary information. I imagine it is everything as far as like tone, inflection, lighting, music, flowers, anything to do with a presentation. So they do the general conference. They organize how that is broadcast. This is like satellite broadcast. They were doing this since the 1960s. Which is, before a lot of other people would be. So General Conference is a client of Bonneville Communications. And I remember being Mormon and thinking, how weird that every single speaker speaks the same way, or like the inflection of the sentences. And like when someone's about to speak, everything goes dark and there's like a spotlight on them and they're standing at a pulpit. It's just like always the same. And I went to BYU for school and they would have devotionals once a week. So like in the middle of the day, I think it was like 11 o'clock, you could go to the conference center and there'd be a speaker with like a spiritual message or whatever. And it was the same thing. You're in this huge arena and the lights go down. There's a spotlight on this guy and he's like talking in the same inflection. And I think like over 40, 50 years of hearing these talks, because you can go back and they're all recorded. I would think to myself, how come the prophet, like even the head of the church, every one of them has the same way of giving a speech, but it's all very, very deliberate. And people don't necessarily realize that. So
It's a way of brainwashing.
Yeah.
They know they're using your...
Indoctrination.
Yeah. Right.
So when I heard that there was actually even a name for it, I was like mind blown. That it's
Right,
that
because you
deliberate.
knew something was going on, but you weren't sure. You're like, hold on a minute. I'm recognizing a pattern here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Wow.
The LDS Church has around General Conference this thing called the spoken word, where there's like all this music playing and someone will be speaking, motivational words or scriptures or something, and there's the music playing behind them. That's all very organized by this Bonneville Communications, as well as the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and how they put on performances. So other clients of Bonneville Communications, Boy Scouts of America, Salvation Army, American Cancer Society, Foot Locker, Wilson's Leather,
Really?
to name a few. And Demetra, before I give you a chance to say WTF or whatever you want to say, I just wanted to read this. This is so crazy. This is from the Bonneville Communications website. Affecting change by reaching the hearts and minds of our audiences. At Bonneville Communications, our ability to touch the hearts and minds of audiences makes us an essential resource for organizations with vital messages. For more than 30 years, our creative professionals have designed public service and direct response messages for national nonprofit organizations such as Huntsman, Cancer Institute, Boy Scouts of America, National Hospice Foundation, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the Salvation Army. Our unique strength is the ability to touch the hearts and minds of our audiences, evoking first feeling, then thought, and finally action. We call this uniquely powerful brand of creative HeartSell, HeartSell, strategic emotional advertising that stimulates response. So they're selling God, by the way.
Of course. They know exactly what they're doing. They're actually even admitting it like, hey, and we're proud of it. We've figured out a way to get into your mind, to trick it, to get to those sensors. And the minute you see a light go down, you hear a certain phrase, you hear a specific monotone, now you're under our spell, so to speak.
Yeah,
Hence,
it's
cult.
kind of like hypnotizing.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? I'm going to say that's kind of brilliant. Though.
It is.
It's brilliant. But I think if you have to do that in order for people to find God or to make them be part of your church or anything, then it's not legit. I don't know what the right choice of words I want to say.
Yeah.
It's manipulative. People should be able to make those choices on their own. I mean, you're point blank saying you're manipulating people to believe and be part of the church and to work a certain way because that's how you want it to operate. Because then you keep someone under your rule and thumb, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm going to say, what the fuck to that?
Yeah.
For sure. Wow.
And it all kind of goes back to money. Because if you want to be in good standing, like the inner circle, if you will, then you need a temple recommend, which means you have to be paying tithing, which is 10% of your income.
Wow.
And this is interesting. Some people who are really wealthy who are Mormon will put all their money in the stock market and only take out what they need and only pay the 10% on what they're taking out of the market. Other people, every single paycheck, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, putting that money in. People who collect disability will give 10% of their disability. Some people that get an inheritance from their parents who've paid tithing their whole lives will pay tithing on the inheritance.
Okay,
it is wild.
To me, it's also very disgusting that we live in a world where if you know, you know, and if you don't know, you don't know. And I think that's why certain people just can't get ahead. And now this is supposed to be church related and to help you. So if those other people in the Mormon community know that. Obviously, they're wealthy enough and they're smart, probably educated, and know I'm only going to give 10% of living off my 10,000 a month. Why wouldn't you tell the other people that are living check to check, like, hey, pay yourself first, then give your 10%? You know, help people. Isn't that what the church was supposed to be community, to help people in need, to give hope? This sounds to me like it is. It's all about money at the end of the day. I don't think anybody needs a church if you want to believe in God or have hope. To each his own. There's a lot of religions out there, but that's where I think it just starts becoming just one big scam.
Well, let me say this. I know plenty of really good people who are very believing Mormons, and they would say, and their opinion is, that it is the only true religion in the world, and that even if you have to lie to somebody to get them in it, then that person is still better off by being in it.
Even if they're lying.
Yes.
See what I'm saying? Hypocrites. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not very big into religion or any kind of religions. And I've never read the Bible and, but I don't think you're supposed to lie. I think that's part of them. Like, thou shalt not kill and lie and be good to your neighbor. I'm sure it goes in all religions to a certain degree.
So tying this all together, though, when you're a Mormon, you're taught that before you came to Earth, you were such a good person that you were sent into a body on Earth that was Mormon. So when you're born into a Mormon family, you're taught that you're special, which is also pretty damaging, in my opinion.
Very.
So it's the only true religion on Earth, and because you are one of the small amount of people that are born on the earth, who are born at this point in history and born to Mormon people, that you have this huge responsibility and you're very special. This kind of leads into MLMs, because I feel like everyone knows that if you're not really good in an MLM pyramid scheme, that you're not going to make money. But there's this underlying thing of, well, you are the special people who should make a lot of money. And by the way, one last thought about the tithing thing. My whole life, growing up, my 20s, I heard so many times at church, you can't afford not to pay tithing. Sentiment being, God blesses you for paying tithing, so you'll get more money by giving your money, which we all know is not true.
You know what's interesting that you say that? Because I feel like, when you scroll through social media, memes come up, or these nice, sayings for the day, do good and good comes back to you, or give without expectation and it'll always come back to you. You know, and I'm a big believer that it does not, only because I know it doesn't. Been there, done that. Plenty of times I've been burned.
Yeah.
Be a good person just to be a good person, not to have any expectations. Well, why don't we just start there? But when you have to say, but if you're a good person or if you do good, it's going to come back to you, right? You pay out, you're going to get it back. I mean, I think it's just another being brainwashed. Again, another form of brainwashing, giving people hope that don't have it. It's just really sad that so many people are manipulated and really truly believe and think that, and can't think for themselves and know that, this doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. Well, and it goes even further to where people believe because they're special, they deserve to be the ones making money at other people's expense. They're okay with it. Do you know what I mean? And then there's this confirmation bias where it's you pay a bunch of your money into the church. If you come into some money somehow, you think, it's because I pay tithing. And if, say someone crashes into your car on the street, you're not even in it. It's not your fault at all. But they leave and now you don't have a car. God is testing you. Right. It's not that God didn't come through when you paid tithing. It's a test because you're such a strong person, you can handle it. Right. So there's always an answer to it. One other side thing while I'm on this topic, the MTC is in Utah. It's called the Missionary Training Center. And all young men are expected to go on a mission when they're 18, 19, for 2 years. And women can go, but men are expected to. And it's perfectly fine for women not to, especially because you need to learn how to be a good homemaker. And, that's kind of your place. So at the Missionary Training Center, how they teach you to convert people is like a master class in sales. They have these kids reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. Do you know that book?
Oh.
By Dale Carnegie. It's a popular one. And 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. These are all like Mormon staples, by the way.
So, first of all, why do you need a training center, schooling to teach people how to recruit other people into your church? Why don't you just let people figure it out for themselves? And what if they weren't born into it? Let them figure it out what they want to be. I mean, obviously, this goes back to recruiting people, getting them in,
Yes.
more money for them because you got to pay your
Tithing.
dues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enough said on my end.
But
you know how I stand
it's
with that.
very organized and very manipulative and deliberate. And they're young kids. And they become even more indoctrinated because they're doing this full time for 2 years.
Wow.
And then they later in life might learn that what they were taught is hard press sales. The kind of things you learn if you're trying to be a car salesman or timeshares,
Yeah.
where like, if somebody asks this question, this is how you respond with this question.
Yeah. And they don't know any different because they think they're doing what they're supposed to do because that's how, like, right? If you're born into it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you do. Everybody has like kind of like their thing. You
Yeah.
know, it doesn't mean that person's bad, but if that's all they've known their whole life, that's what they do, right?
Yeah.
But I think at some point, I mean, common sense should kick in. You become an adult and things should make sense and you should be able to make those decisions. But I think people don't want to face it and they just continue on because they just believe in the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. That pretty much wraps up what I wanted to talk about. So let's leave it at that today. But I wanted everyone to be able to look into HeartSell if you'd like. I'm all for marketing. But I mean, when it comes to these like hardcore sales, the ethics are very questionable, especially when what you're selling is religion. All right. Well, thanks for listening. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, leave us a rating, unless you don't like the show, and then don't do that.
Right.
Just if you're thinking like 5 stars, yes, do it. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.